this video. So today we will see how to do an email validation. Okay, so basically this is what we are going to do. Let's say I enter here a wrong email. Okay, if I click on next, you see invalid email format. Okay, and if I change this and I put something valid, let's say frank@me.com. So this is a valid email. So if I click on next again, now you can see that the error message is gone, and maybe you can proceed to the password or something. Okay, so that's enough talking. Let's dive into the code. New project. So the first thing we want to do is to create this view. Okay, the sign in view. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a right click here, new file, and here what we want is a SwiftUI view, and let's call it sign in view. We want to do is simply replace this into our app email validation. So instead of this content view, what we want is this sign-in view. Okay, so perfect. So now what we want is we want this test field and we want this button. Okay, and we want everything in a V stack. Okay, so let's do it. Let's add a V stack with those three elements: this test, our test field, and our button. Okay, and for this test field I added this property, like a state property, to take our email. Okay, and as you can see, it does not look that good. Okay, so what we want is we want this to be of our screen. Okay, so we want is to change the background color of our view. Okay, so in order to do that, we want to act on this V stack. Okay, so let's add this padding, a background color, a corner radius, and also the ignore save area. But you can see that it doesn't take the whole screen. Okay, so for that to take the full screen, what we can do is simply add spacer. Okay, okay, so yeah, I added two spacer to center our V stack, but what we can do, we can add more spacer at the so that we can push this. As you can see here, we can push this to the top. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to style this signing. Okay, we want to style this signing so that it looks exactly like this. Okay, large title, a weight, bold, and also a padding. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to style our test view. Okay, our test need to look like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and style our test field. For our test field, we want to add a padding. We want to disable the auto capitalization. So basically what this one does is that when you enter something here, it does not capitalize the first letter. Okay, so if I comment this and I try to enter something, we see that it will capitalize the first letter. Okay, so let's uncomment this, and we also want for the type of the keyboard, we want it to be an email address, the background color white, a corner radius, and also a little shadow. Okay, so the next thing is to style our button. We want our button to look like this. Okay, so let's say weight semi-bold, a frame. So what we are saying there is that, okay, you can take the max full width. Okay, and we also added a padding, a background color, a foreground color, which is this color, and also a corner radius. But as you can see, we don't have enough spacing here between our element. So what we can do is to simply add a spacing on our V stack. Okay, so here we can put a spacing of 30. So our UI looks exactly as a finished version of the app. So the next thing we will do is to do the email validation itself. Okay, and in order to do that, what we want to do is to create a view model. Okay, because we don't want to put our logic inside our view. Okay, so let's go ahead, right click, new file. We want a Swift file, and we will call it view model. Is created, so let's create the view model itself. View model. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, we want to tie this email to our view model. Okay, because right now what we have is we declare this in our view, but we don't want to have any logic on our view. Okay, so let's remove this and put it in our view model. I'll put it in our view model as a public variable, So what pop this error because we removed this one. So what we want to do, we want to first reference our view model and then put our email here. Okay, so let's reference our view model first. For an object of our view model here, we can simply replace this email with view model.email. We are still able to change this variable. Okay, it's working fine. Okay, so the next we want to do our email validation. Okay, and in order to do that, we need the function. So let's call the function is valid email. So what we want to do, every time that we press on the next button, we want to validate this email, and if it's a correct email, we want to proceed to the next page. And if it's not a valid email, what we want to do, we want to display the error message that we had here in valid email format. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, we want to test flow. Okay, so in order to test our flow, what we want to do, we want to create this error message. So this is a test basically, so we want to add this test, and we also want to add a variable where we can store whether or not we have an error message on this test view. And in our view model, let's create a message. What we can do is simply, when we call this is valid email, we can simply say that this email error message will be equal to invalid email format. So what we are doing right now is simply testing a flow. Okay, so let's go back to our view and let's connect this method to a button. Okay, so every time we press on this button, we want to call this method. Okay, is valid email. So let's remove this print and put valid email. Okay, so right now what we want to do is that we want to put a test here after this test field. Okay, so in case we don't have like a valid email, we want to display on message, but if the error message is empty, we want to remove this. Okay, so let's add this test. So here we are saying that if this email error message is not empty, because we have this, if it's not empty, display this. Okay, but if it's empty, you can just skip this part and it won't display anything. Okay, so let's test this. So let's press on our button, and as you can see, we have this because when we press here, we put this invalid email format into our error message and we can display it on our view. Okay, but as you can see, when we press it, this it's not formatted the way we want. So let's fix that first. To fix it, we create a new vstack. So inside this vstack, we create another one and we remove the spacing. Okay, because right now, because of the spacing we have, remember we have this spacing, a 30 spacing. Okay, so because of that, we have this big match, and we also like specify that we want the alignment to be leading. Okay, so let's put our test field and our test inside this vstack. And if we press our button again, we can see that everything is formatted nicely. Okay, so now what we want to do, we want to focus on this is valid email. Okay, because of this error message every time we press on this email validation. Okay, what we want to do, we want to take this email and do a proper validation. Okay, so in order to do that, we will use a regex format. Okay, for those of you who don't know what is regex, so regex is basically a standard format that we use either for name or email. Okay, so here I will simply paste this. So this is the standard validation for any email. Okay, and now we want to use a ns predicate to say, okay, whatever they will pass in this predicate, check if the value is equal to this regex. Okay, so let's do that. Let's add a email validation or email test. So what we are saying here is that, okay, whatever we will pass to this email test, we want to make sure that it's conform to this regex. Okay, so say, okay, take this email test, evaluate this email to check conforms to this regex, and if it does, what we want to do, we want to set this email error message to be empty. And if it does not, send this message invalid email format to this email error message. Okay, perfect. So now let's try this. Because of flow and everything is already connected, we can play. Okay, so let's first enter a Let's press on next, and we can see we have this email format. Now let's put a valid email. Let's say Frank at me.com, and let's press on the button, and as you can see we don't have this message anymore. Okay, so we accomplished our goal here. So we have a validation for our email. So in case the user enter a valid email, we can proceed to the next page. Okay, so that's it for this video. Then in the we'll see is how to test this. Okay, so we will write a test for this function, okay, to make sure that everything is working correctly when we are pushing our app to the store. Okay, so thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.